My whole life I've loved comic books. The unending battle between good and evil. The battle between those who would do the right thing, giving selflessly of themselves, and those who would continually act out of their own selfish needs. It was all laid out so simply. It was all so black and white. As I grew older, I started to believe that life was actually mostly gray, and that things weren't as black and white as they originally seemed. For the most part, that's probably true. But lately, mankind has shown me otherwise. When tragedy strikes, it brings out the best in people. It also brings out the worst. Extreme situations like these seem to take away the gray and make everything black and white again. Hurricane Sandy took us all by surprise. In a matter of hours, a good portion of the eastern seaboard had been devastated by nothing more than water. Relentless water that fell from the sky. Combined with a full moon, high tides, and terrific winds, the water rose quickly, destroying everything in its path. Over the past few years, we've continually received warnings of a terrible storm requiring people in low-lying areas to evacuate their homes. When the storms weren't as bad as we expected, we were annoyed at the inconvenience and chalked it up to another mistake by meteorologists. This time was different. Most residents did eventually evacuate their homes once again, but we all assumed that it would be just another inconvenience. We were wrong. Those of us not directly in the path of Sandy simply woke up that morning in our own homes, with everything seeming basically normal. Others who had evacuated also woke up in relative comfort at a friend or family's home, completely unaware of what exactly had occurred back at their own home the night before. Nearly all of us were initially oblivious to the full extent of what had occurred during the night. Only those who remained directly in the path of Sandy had suffered through the night of torrential rain, wind, and flooding. By morning, the eastern seaboard had become relatively quiet. Some looked out and saw a mess of leaves, branches, and other debris in our yards. Still, everything seemed basically fine. Even those with downed trees, a common sight that late October morning, probably felt that they had suffered the worst of it. Many awoke without power and probably figured it would be restored quickly enough, as it always is when this sort of thing happens. But most of us were unaware of what really took place during the night. It was only over the next few hours and the next few days that we all became slowly and painfully aware of the true disaster that had occurred. For those of us who were lucky enough to still have power, the messages started coming in. Once you started checking Facebook or calling others or watching the news, the reality of the situation slowly began to unfold. Little by little, we became aware that there was an unusual disconnect between the residents of neighboring towns. Images followed. Shocking images. Images not from any one single location, but from all over. And they just kept coming. Much of the eastern seaboard had been slammed by Sandy. Images of major metropolitan areas that usually seem to be immune to destruction from nature. Destruction at a level we had not seen in this country since 9/11. Boardwalks and amusement parks were taken down in a single night. Houses flooded and destroyed. Some completely washed away. Massive flooding from well down below Delaware and up as far as Rhode Island. Tunnels and subways flooded with water. New York City brought to its knees. Most of the island of Manhattan without electricity, as well as the surrounding boroughs. No one could ever have imagined the devastation that took place throughout Staten Island. In Queens, an entire town burned to the ground. In total, a storm that started its path of destruction in the Caribbean had reached 22 states and gone up as far as Canada. It was like nothing we had ever seen before. As we slowly rose back to our feet, we started to connect again. Each hour and each day, the devastation became more and more clear. During the days that followed Sandy, we were given a choice. A choice to do the right thing or to do the wrong thing. A choice to help others or to help ourselves. There were those who took the opportunity to capitalize on the misfortune of others. Drugstores in Coney Island were raided shortly after the water receded. One man trying to steal copper piping from a home that had collapsed was actually caught while crawling out from under the debris. Imagine risking your own life for a petty crime when so many others around you needed help. During the chaos, criminals in New Brunswick, New Jersey managed to remove the entire contents of apartments using a moving truck. Looting had begun, and police forces that were needed for other emergencies had one more thing to deal with. Price gouging at the pumps started as soon as gas stations with power realized they were part of a minority, and that their product was very much in demand by people running gas-powered generators and others simply needing to drive somewhere. As if the storm wasn't bad enough, all of these crimes were committed against people in desperate need. They were committed by people who saw an opportunity to benefit at the expense of someone else. People have a strange way of justifying their actions, but any reasonable person can see that this is the worst of us. These are the people who make society worse. Like predators waiting for an opportunity to seize what they want, they take it by force. And then there were those who basically turned a blind eye. They went along with their lives as if it were business as usual. Since it didn't affect them, they didn't much care. From people who simply complained about the minor inconvenience of not having power while those around them had lost everything, to those who didn't even acknowledge that there was a problem happening right here in our own backyard. It was all too similar to the same factions we've seen with regards to the economy over the past decade. Those who hadn't lost their jobs were doing just fine, and most weren't even aware of just how bad it had gotten for the many who were long-term unemployed. In some ways, we seem to live in a nation that is so quick and willing to extend our hand to help others beyond our own boundaries. But when problems arise right here at home, people are hung out to dry. Thankfully, there were many who made a different choice after Sandy struck. The right choice. The choice that required effort and sacrifice on their part. Effort that wouldn't benefit them personally in any way, but instead would help others in need. These people began to help, donating food, clothing, and shelter to those who had lost everything, pitching in to help with the long cleanup ahead. Even something as small as letting those who were without power charge their devices so they could call loved ones or reconnect to the world to see what was happening. These situations bring out the best and the worst in people. Under these circumstances, things quickly go from being gray to being black and white. The heroes and the villains are revealed. It's as if someone above suddenly turns up the contrast on all of us, bringing out our true nature. Extreme storms caused all of this damage in just a few short hours. I can't help but wonder what 40 days and 40 nights would do to the planet. I also can't help but wonder if this was an act of God or if we brought it on ourselves. Maybe it was just a storm waiting to happen. Whatever you believe, there's no denying the irony of what's resulted. A world that's already being taxed by man's existence is about to be pushed further in the wrong direction. We need to rebuild. Thankfully, for those who've lost everything, that will happen, although maybe not as fast as they need. That rebuilding will require us to take yet more resources from a planet that's already starting to fight back. And the cleanup from the destruction will result in unimaginable tons of trash. All across New Jersey, Manhattan, Staten Island, and Queens, streets are lined with tons upon tons of trash. Appliances, rugs, sheetrock, insulation, furniture, toys. Now all of it garbage, and all of it needing to be replaced. A friend mentioned that as a result of having no power for an extended period of time and witnessing so many others living through this experience under such hardship, they've decided to start practicing 1 day a week where they use no power at all. That's very honorable and a small step in the right direction, which will help the environment. It's probably not so great for the utility company that supplies her power. After all, what happens if the masses start doing the right thing and all of us start practicing this? Corporations don't like to see decreased revenues. This is why in 2012, we're all still driving gas-powered vehicles. This is why our homes are still primarily powered by natural gas, oil, and electricity instead of solar. How can that be when we've had so many alternative choices for decades now? It boils down to greed. The same greed that drove heartless individuals to capitalize on victims of Sandy. The same greed simply placed into another individual's hands, but this time an individual of privilege and power who can benefit on a much larger scale. While most of us are simply cogs in the machine who go about our daily lives to survive, we may feel like we don't have the ability to affect what's happening at the top, to change what's happening in the world. After all, corporations are huge. Corporations are powerful. Corporations control the world. But corporations are made up of people just like you and me. And corporations depend on people like us to consume their products. Without us, they have no revenue. There are always things we can do to make a difference, both big and small. And the real difference comes in unity. There is strength in numbers. Remember, even a tiny drop of water will eventually wear away something as resilient as a stone. Each of us can be that drop of water. Each of us can work together to create change. The fact is that most Americans don't seem to truly want to sacrifice to make a difference. We're happy with our extremely comfortable lifestyles. At times like this, some may make temporary sacrifices, but most will simply go back to the way things were before. Once the dust settles, we'll all get back into the day-to-day and forget about how much mankind is drawing off of Mother Earth. Perhaps, but only until next time. This disaster is a sign of things to come if humans don't start curbing our appetites. We're consumers and we're greedy, and regardless of what you may have heard, greed is not good. There will be a tipping point where the environment will no longer tolerate us. When it comes to man versus Earth, you'd better place your money on the Earth. The devastation of Sandy happened almost quietly in just a matter of a few short hours. Imagine the potential damage we would suffer if we experienced long-term severe conditions like this. Humans cannot exist without the Earth, but the Earth will go on long after we're gone. Many choose to live in ignorance and enjoy their lifestyles now. The worst of us depend on the many. They depend on us to be consumers. They depend on us not fighting back against their corruption and greed. They depend on us to be weak and be happy with the comforts they sell us. This gives those few privileged ones total sovereignty. They make the rules about what we consume and how it's powered. They decide what they will sell to us. They make those decisions not based on the right choice or what's beneficial to us as a species or what's best for mankind's future, but simply on how they can make the greatest profits. Native Americans believed that you should only take from the land that which you need to survive. They understood and appreciated the gifts we are given by Mother Earth. They understood our role in the big scheme of things. If we're not willing to curb our appetites now, then very soon nature may curb them for us. We are merely guests here, and we need to start acting as such. The planet and the environment are powerful, and we need to respect them. Unlike the dinosaurs, we have the intelligence to understand what's happening and to prevent it if it's not already too late. This country and this world were never meant to be controlled by a few corrupt individuals. We need to take back the control that's been put into the hands of the few. We need to do it now before it's too late. As individuals, we need to make sacrifices to help those in need. We also need to curb our appetites and simply cut back. We need to form alliances that will grow strong, avoid corruption, and guide our society in the right direction. A direction that is beneficial to all of us. We do it for the future. We do it for our children. We do it if we simply plan on waking up tomorrow morning and living in this world one more day. A world that allows us the courtesy of staying here for a relatively short time. We all make choices every day. It's time to start understanding how those choices affect our future.